me, Vicki Marie, and the story I'm going to tell you tonight, well, it's not a story, it really happened. I'm going to tell you the story of Alison Botha. And this case happened quite a long time ago, but it's relevant still, and especially relevant now, because the people that were guilty, found guilty for this terrible, terrible crime, have been released on parole after 28 years of being in prison. Now, the other reason I want to tell this story is Alison Botha is an example of courage, strength, just unbelievable survival in the face of adversity, and also turning it around to become a positive role model for other women and girls, and to try and prevent that kind of thing happening again. But unfortunately it probably has happened again many, many times in the years. But Alison is just a heroine in my eyes, what she went through and how she turned it into a positive. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what happened to Alison Botha. So we're going back to 1994, and we are in South Africa. Now, something I need to tell you about South Africa is that from January to March this year, 2023, nearly 1,000 women were murdered and more than 1,500 women were assaulted. And that is just this year alone, from January to March. So South Africa does, it hasn't got the best reputation for women's safety, let's say. Gosh, my computer's gone all weird. So what happened to Alison Botha? She was 27 years old, and she'd been out for the day with friends. She'd been out, she was giving people, she had a fun day with her friends, and she returned to, when she finally returned to her apartment in Port Elizabeth, South Africa, and as she stopped her car almost at the door of her house, a man with a knife broke into her vehicle. Now, you know, South Africa is a very dangerous place. Anyway, she was a typical young South African when it happened. She'd grown up in Port Elizabeth. After her graduation, she went out and travelled the world, and then she returned to South Africa and began working as an insurance broker. That day, which was December 18th of that year, she'd spent sort of the day with her friends on the beaches of South Africa, so I'm presuming it must be warm in December. So it was as she pulled up outside her house, she felt a rush of warm air coming through into her car, and that's where it all went wrong, because a guy got into her car, and this guy was a young blonde guy, and as he got in, she saw the reflection of a knife. So he broke into a vehicle. His name was Franz de Troyes. Anyway, he then told her to get into the passenger seat. He took his place behind the wheel, and she was trapped inside her own car. So he locked the car doors, and he drove a couple of blocks around the corner and picked up another man. And this man, this was when she knew, because up to now, Franz de Troyes had told her that he was just going to steal a car, he wasn't going to do anything to her, you know, to calm her down. He'd told her all this shite, and you know, and she believed him, because, but it was when the other guy got into the car, when he drove a couple of blocks, opened the door, and Thins Kruger got into the car, that's when she knew she really was in trouble, because this guy, he had a real resentment towards women, and it showed in his face as soon as he got in the car. She knew when he got into the car she was really, really in trouble. Anyway, they then took her, kidnapped her if you like, took her off to a field, and they told her that they were going to violate her, and they said, will you fight? And she was so terrified for her life, she just said no, and she did not fight. She knew what was, you know, she feared the worst, and well, probably initially she was just thinking, you know, if they would get the violation over with and then they would go, but unfortunately that wasn't what they had in mind. So they did violate her, but then more than that, because they didn't want her to identify them, they then, now I'm going to have to try and say this in a way that's not too graphic, but it's very difficult not to say it in a graphic way, but they I'm trying to say it in a way that YouTube will not pick up, because you know YouTube, they scan your video and they pick up for words. There's no real way that I can say this. Basically what they did, they cut open her stomach, and she had to put her own intestines back in and hold them in. They also gosh, again, how do I say this in a way that is not too graphic, because I don't want to upset people, but you can't get any more graphic than this really. Well, put it this way, they practically removed her head from her shoulders. Practically. They wanted to kill her. They left her for dead. They did these two terrible injuries, one of her head, one of her stomach, and she was also stabbed around 50 times around her body. But by some miracle, she just kept breathing, and they finally, off they went. They were about to leave her for dead. As they realised she was still alive after they had done what they'd done to her stomach, then du Toit actually made the statement that he wanted to do something to her reproductive organs. He was so resentful of women. They both were resentful of women because women didn't like them. You know, they weren't successful with women. So they were basically taking out all their anger on poor Alison. So it's when they realised that she was still alive that they decided to do what they did to her throat. She said, all I could see was an arm moving over my face, left and right and left and right. I could hear sounds, wet sounds. That, you know, I just, can you imagine how that would have been? Anyway, miraculously, none of the stab wounds hit any vital part of her body, and somehow the adrenaline that was generated by her body prevented her from feeling pain. She did not feel pain, and she didn't realise how badly she was hurt. Again, miraculously, I mean, this woman was meant to still be with us. Her airway had been destroyed, but luckily for her, she could still breathe, because it was she could breathe through one of the holes in her neck that carried the air into her lungs. Just unbelievable. Anyway, she said it felt unreal, but she didn't feel pain. It felt like a dream, but it wasn't a dream. She realised it was actually happening. The guy was trying to, you know, basically cut her throat. Anyway, by some miracle, she was still alive, and she was conscious, but feeling no pain. I mean, it's strange, isn't it, how the body works? You would think that you would be in agony. And of course, she'd lost a lot of blood, and you know, the men were satisfied that they had, you know, they left her for dead, basically. They walked off and left her for dead. So they'd violated her. In their eyes, they'd murdered her. You know, later, of course, you can only be prosecuted for attempted murder, can't you? But to me, I don't see the difference. The only reason that should be a murder case, because the only difference, you know, they were just lucky, really, as she was lucky. There should be a separate offence of that, you know, not attempted murder. It should be like murder, because it's only for the grace of God that it wasn't for their doing. Anyway, apparently one of them turned to the other and said no one can survive that, and off they walked and left her there. But she was still breathing, and she was going to survive. So first thing she did, she wrote the names of her attackers in the sand, because they gave her their names. She saw some headlights, and she knew she had to get to the road to get help. So as soon as she couldn't hear their voice any longer, so she knew they were far enough away, she attempted to stand up, and that's when she realised, because her head, gosh, there's just no way of, you know, her head fell back. That's when she realised that she had nearly lost her head, literally. So as she moved forward, she had to hold it, and also she had to push back into her stomach her intestines that she felt dangling down. Gosh, I think YouTube's going to just bin me off this video, but I don't know any other way that I can. I'm trying to, that's why I'm hesitating, because I'm trying to say it, you know, in a nice way, and there is no nice way, is there? Anyway, she staggered to the path, using one hand to keep on her stomach and the other hand on her head, just literally holding herself together. Gosh. So she realised, because her vision dimmed, you know, she was that far from death, wasn't she? You know, her vision dimmed and faded, and she kept falling, but she kept getting up again. She was determined. I mean, what a woman! You know, the bravery, the stamina, the instinct to survive, just shows you our instinct to survive is very strong, isn't it? Anyway, she kept falling, but she managed to get up again. She finally made it to the road, and she just lay down in the middle of the road, and the first vehicle that passed didn't stop for her. The second vehicle pulled over, and the person who saw the state she was in began to actually vomit, but they did call 911, but it took an hour for the ambulance to arrive. Anyway, fortunately for Alison, there was a young guy, a young veterinary student called Tian Aylard. He was vacationing or holidaying in Port Elizabeth at the time, and he saw her unconscious. He stopped, and he obviously had some medical experience, even though it was only with, you know, with animals. But there's not much difference really in your basic things. And things that he'd learned, he could do things to help her that saved her life, basically, because it took the ambulance so long to arrive. If he hadn't have gone past, maybe she would have bled to death before the ambulance got there. Anyway, she identified the attacker. She survived. She identified the attackers from photos in the police file, and they were arrested that very same day, or later that very same day. And these attackers, they did identify themselves as Satanists, and she said later Satan really did try to stick. She felt like she was touched by the devil that day. Do you know? And the thing is, I don't believe in Satanism, though I do think a lot of people do believe in Satanism. But if you believe in God, you have to believe in Satan or the devil, whatever you want to call it. Just as if you believe in the devil, you have to believe in God. This is what I don't understand. You can't believe in the devil and not believe in God, or believe in God. There are definitely, our whole life journeys, we're being influenced from both sides. We make decisions, some are small decisions. We make decisions every day about whether to do the right thing or the wrong thing. Most of us don't come up against decisions like these guys made, you know, to do terrible things, but we all do little bad things that perhaps we shouldn't do. And that is, we're always battling between, you could call it God and the devil, you can call it whatever you like, but the thing is, that is what we're doing. Our conscience sometimes, isn't it? How many times do you sort of think about doing something, then your conscience steps in and says, no, you shouldn't do that. Or sometimes your conscience doesn't win and you go ahead and do something that you know really, obviously not to the extent of what these horrible men did, but you do, so you know, it could be a really small thing, and sometimes your conscience wins, sometimes your conscience doesn't. But if your conscience hasn't persuaded you not to do that thing, it's still like sort of pecking your head, isn't it, after you think, oh, I shouldn't have done that, I shouldn't have done that. But we're all human, we all do things wrong, but we don't do things like this, obviously. So my point is, what I'm trying to say is, I do believe in the devil. I believe in the devil because I believe in God. I believe in good and evil. I just think that the names are just names for it. You know, you can call it what you like, but there's a good side to everybody and a bad side to everybody, and sometimes people get caught up in the bad side, and you know, maybe even are born a little bit evil. I don't know. I'm not saying I know all the answers, I don't, but I just can never imagine the conversation between people like this. They're sort of sitting there watching the telly or whatever and saying, oh, let's go and find a woman to violate and murder and, you know, remove her head from her shoulders. You just can't imagine it, can you? Anyway, her injuries healed, but obviously she had a lot of emotional scars. But what she did turn it around. She became a motivational speaker. She became a motivational speaker to warn women and girls against gender violence. She also had been told initially that she would never have children, but she did. She's got, despite being told that it was medically impossible for her to become pregnant, she actually went on to have 2 children. And she met her partner in 1995. They bonded over their shared ordeals. He'd been through some ordeals as well. He suffered from depression as a result of childhood trauma, and she was struggling at the time. So they sort of met in their misery in a way, but something good came out of it. Because they got married, their mutual despair was the basis for a friendship first, and then eventually a basis for a relationship. So they finally got married in February 1997. They had their first child in November 2003, Danielle, and their second child, Matthew, in November 2006. And so she had that experience of becoming a mother, and thank God for that. She's also written 2 books, and also her story has been made into a film simply called Alison. I must look out for that film because I haven't seen it. Now, of course, the reason that this has come come back into the public eye, if you like, because you know, it was quite a while ago, is that just last month, in July, was it July or would it have been June? Just let me check. No, July, just at the beginning of July, these two, I can't even mention their names, these two horrible men, they were released from prison on parole. So they're out after that, what they did. Why are they out? You know, I just can't imagine how that makes her feel, knowing that they're out and walking around after what they did to her. And will they do it to somebody else? They're not going to have got any better in prison, are they? They're not going to hate women any less now because they've been in prison all that time. In fact, if anything, they're going to hate women more. I just don't understand it. Anyway, so you can imagine everyone's fuming, but it won't make any difference, will it? Will it? So apparently she received an email on the 23rd of June saying, from July the 4th, Mr. Dutoit will be on a 3-month day parole, after which he will be released under normal parole conditions and will form part of the social interaction system in Bloemfontein. It's unbelievable. So I think they've both been released on the same thing as far as I know. Yeah, they're both released from prison on parole after serving 28 years behind bars. So, what do you think about that? Do you think that's correct? Do you think they deserve it? I mean, I'm asking the question because I have to ask the question for balance. But do you think, I doubt if many of you are going to say, if any of you are going to say that they should be released. But is there any of you that think that that's fair enough? They've done 28 years. I'm just trying to find what their original sentence was. So let's just sum up though. So she had 30 stab wounds to her stomach and her throat slit. She was left for dead in the bushes, but she managed to scribble the names of her attackers in the sand before crawling to the edge of the road. So they were sentenced to life imprisonment. It's another one of them, isn't it? Life doesn't mean life. Anywhere, where does life mean life? I mean, I'm just wondering if there's an actual statement from Alison. Only from a lawyer. So a lawyer says she was very shocked, she was very surprised. There's two aspects we need to deal with. Number one, the fact they're going to be released. That of course it scares her, and she said to me it doesn't only scare her for herself but for other people out there. And also not being kept in the loop exacerbated the situation, because I thought, you know, when people come up for parole in Britain, the families of the victims, they can, you know, put in a resolution against it, can't they? They can have their say, everyone can have their say, but she wasn't. She was just notified they were being released. She wasn't asked for any sort of victim impact or statement or to make any comment. So it's the shock of not being notified. She gets the news from the media. She expected the department to keep her updated and informed. So anyway, apparently she's still gathering information before plotting a way forward. And her lawyer said, I don't have instructions at this point in time to launch any High Court application to take the Minister's decision. I'm still gathering information, and then Alison will make the call on how to proceed. I bet she just cannot believe it. I mean, I hope she does put in some kind of appeal against this. I hope she is able to do that. To me, I just think, well, I'm a bit speechless really. which is unusual for me, because if you lived, where are they going to release them to? Where are they going to release them to? You know, imagine. So you've been kidnapped, you've been violated, you've been stabbed, you've had your throat slit, you've had to hold your own entrails in, you've had to hold your own head up so that you, because otherwise your head might have just fell back. I mean, I can't even think about it. Your vision's going in and out, you're falling over, getting up, you've managed to get to the road, you managed to get saved, you managed to get the horrible people that have done this put away in prison for life, or so you think. You survive, you get married, you have children despite all odds, you become a motivational speaker, you try and help other people, and then these people just get let out. Just get let out. You know, it's unbelievable. So apparently this, the movie about her, Alison 2016, supposedly is available on Prime Video. How did she manage to survive? I mean, it is, it's incredible, isn't it? She was meant to survive for a reason, bless her. I'm just looking to see if there's anything else I can tell you. No. Ah. Yep. Okay, so that's the story of Alison Botha. What do you think about it? Do you think those men have served enough time and should be out on parole? It's almost unbelievable, isn't it? Anyway, okay, so thank you for being here with me for this story. I know it's a weird story, isn't it, in a way, because of course it is sad and it's horrific and it's all those things, but it's also a story of survival, story of strength, you know, an incredible woman that managed to survive that. Not only survive it, but put it behind her, and you know, make her life mean something, you know, to other people as well. So yeah, good on you, Alison, and let's just hope that maybe something comes out and these guys don't get out in the end, or I don't know, or at least I hope everybody's safe from them. Okay, so don't remember to always live and love very carefully, very wisely. I'll see you very soon in the next video, and until then, may your God always go with you. Thank you.